two short stories. The first one takes place in an art museum, and the second one takes place in Vilnius, and I started writing it after my first trip here. So this first story is called Going Along, and the narrator is male, so don't get thrown off by my voice. Okay, so this is Going Along. They were lying in the street, but they looked pretty new, still sharp around the edges. I picked up the tickets and handed one to the girl, Mika. We'd met before a couple times, and I recognized her as soon as I saw her in the subway. Without even saying anything, she'd just gotten on the escalator with me and told me where she'd slept the night before. That's how she was, open, going along. As we'd risen toward the street, the morning sun came in and edged all the silver in a yogi light. Her coat was missing 2 buttons around the middle, and she kept switching which hand her one mitten was on and putting the other one into the gaping part of the coat. Last time we'd met was at the library, so I figured she'd get a Napoleon joke. I told her, and yup, she laughed. Without looking at each other too much, being real casual, we walked straight past the museum's coat room and information desk and right up to the scanners. Scanners were better than guards taking tickets. I laid one end of the ticket down first, letting the rest curve until it was flat. The light blinked green. The beep was like, come on through. I glanced at Mika quickly and then pushed through the turnstile. Her ticket did the same. Blink, beep, turn, and we were in. Even though it was early, a crowd was starting to gather, so we went up a few flights to start at a random point and spiral around the museum. We both just wanted to look at some pictures of women anyway. Gauguin, washerwomen, 1888, oil on burlap. The shapes of their skirts, all hunched on the ground, were not drawn like legs and skirts, but more like messy scoops of ice cream. And the scoops looked like they might just melt away from the bodies, leaving empty spaces where the stomach should be. The grayish-green poofed tops of the trees in the background were the same shapes as the skirts, but turned on their sides. When you were a painter, you had to know how to make one thing that wasn't really anything look like something real. Gauguin, still life with 3 puppies, 1888, oil on wood. 3 dogs, big old bowl, 3 glasses, plenty of fruit to go around. Gauguin schmogan, Mika said, which was how you could tell she didn't really care about something, and so we went to the next room. Bacon, 3 studies for the portrait of Henrietta Moraeus, 1963, oil on canvas, 3 panels. They looked like a cartoon woman who'd stood in front of a funhouse mirror and turned her face from side to side, or a woman who taped her face up until her features shifted into something funny. It also seemed like the painter might not have liked her very much. That's a woman, Mika asked, and I shrugged, pointing to the plaque. Mika leaned close to my ear. Those red swoops, do they look like blood to you? Kinda. Mika's mom's boyfriend had cut her face with a knife when he found out she liked girls. That's how she ended up running away. She would tell you things like that right when she met you. Before that, she'd been, so she said, a kid model. But it wasn't the kind of scar you could use makeup on and then just pretend she was still a model with how her eyelashes were dewy around her huge black eyes. It was more like part of her cheek had been chewed up, so even if you colored it in her face color, it was still just all. That's why the first time I met her, I thought I already knew her. Thought she might have been a kid at the center, I mean. Van Gogh, A Starry Night, 1889, oil on canvas. The trees swept up like flames of water, and the stars looked like fireflies in a sea of swirling night. I've seen this one before a lot. Everyone's seen that one before a lot, Mika told me. She pulled me into a room that had doors on all 4 walls and Picassos all around. There were 2 old ladies with matching purses staring at a smallish guitar painting, but they turned to look at us and then hurried each other through one of the doors. Picasso, Girl with a Mandolin, 1910, oil on canvas. Soft colors, but the body of the woman was shattered by awkward blocks. Her head looked like it had been split in half, surrounded by planes out of step with the contour of her face. We both stood and frowned at it. When I was a kid, my mom worked at this art therapy center where we also lived, where kids with all sorts of problems came to stay. Even though I was little, my job was the bulletin board, pictures that recreated famous paintings. In one that worked out pretty well, 2 kids lounged on the floor, grazing each other's fingertips, faces lit up as if they were truly floating along the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Another was just a vase of sunflowers with the Van Gogh print propped up next to it, but I remember the tiny bald girl who put them in the vase had stood there beaming while I took the picture. There was this kid, Sean, who came back into my dreams sometimes. His features were blurry, like underwater life. eyes all the way or almost all the way shut. I couldn't tell. His arms groped the air, one ending just after the elbow in a soft seam knot. And the sound that came out of him, like when a faucet shrieked from somewhere deep and grimy. When his mom came to visit, she rubbed his thread-thin brown hair back from his forehead over and over while they talked. My mom would lean over to kiss Sean in the center of his muddled face, like touching him was a contest between them. One day, Mom had told me to tape up a bunch of Picasso posters around the lounge, split open guitars and bodies everywhere. I'll never forget Sean coming in the room and his moan sounding more attentive, like a baby recognizing something. He was intentionally pointing at a fallen-to-pieces picture that hadn't seemed to me like a face. When Mom came in the lounge, she cooed, "Oh, look at you," but I didn't know which one of us she was talking to. That was all before my mom went voices in the head nuts. Now she lived in a home with her deaf beige parakeet that she called the same name as me. When I turned away from the girl with the mandolin, Mika's eyes were extra astonishing. When Mika, as a real little girl, had gone to Puerto Rico for the first time to meet her grandma, the first Spanish word she learned was for eyes, since everyone she met noticed hers. The compliments had poured up from the streets like the consensus of a bloodless revolution. We hit a bunch of other rooms, but when the crowd started jostling us, we walked through an emptier exhibit in a hall that led toward the exit. All around us were mannequins, arms to the sky, strung up with fishnetty chicken wire and cables. Their shadows splayed across the ceiling, and Mika said she felt like we were walking through a forest. I shook my head, but I didn't know how else to describe it. Before we left, I went into the men's room and finished off their soap dispenser until my fingernails were tipped with white lines instead of greenish-black ones. Luckily, they had paper towels instead of blow things, so I could reach into my clothes and clean a little. I was feeling good when I came out, too, but when I let the door close behind me, Mika said, "Mensch, men." I could feel the cold through the glass exit door, but at the top of a trash can heap, I saw a Hershey's wrapper bulked out like there might be something in it. I picked it up, and yup, it still had half the bar, not even broken. Mika stopped walking like she was waiting for us to talk about something, but when I kept going, she started up again, kind of next to me and kind of behind me. I went into a park where some people I knew sometimes were, and sat down on the only bench that was empty. It was that kind of November afternoon when you couldn't believe how cold you felt, but you knew in March when it was this temperature, you'd feel warm. There was a smell like onions mixed with kerosene that kept coming our way, then going away again. I could tell by the way that Mika was staying on the bench that she didn't have somewhere for tonight either. In front of us, an old woman with hair like an old bath mat and a long coat over a short nightgown was kneeling on the ground with a scruffy white dog. I didn't know whether it was her dog or just a dog that was there. It must have been an old dog, missing teeth, since its tongue hung out one side. The lady's coat billowed out around her and behind the dog on both sides. She bent her head all the way over, cocking the dog's head with her hands and bringing his cheek to her mouth. Mika smiled, her one cheek all bunchy. "Klimt, the kiss," she said. 2013, I said. "Lady and dog on dirt." Mika laughed at that, and I handed her half a chocolate bar. That lady kept kissing that dog, and the lines of scruff above the dog's eyes pretended in my mind they were his eyebrows, looking like, what now? And this is a flash fiction piece called Above the Ghetto. Above the Ghetto. The idea was to find the gentle angles of Chagall, to flatten into those bodies of powdery colors stuck to skies, to bend the crisp flicks of the trapeze into the boneless wisps of the paintings, muscles softened to the swing of the ropes, while still appearing to be flying, not broken. The idea was to set the riggings at the gate and at several points around the perimeter of the once ghetto. They walked miles to find the gates, to track the depths of the courtyards that were now filled with cafes, to remember the boundaries with their feet. The idea was then to leave their feet. The idea was that they would travel to Vilna, city of their ancestors, and whip their trapeze artist beauty into protest. The idea was, once the apparatus was set, that every moment 4 of them would be in the air and one would wait to be picked up. When she was up, another would land. By the finale, they would all have landed outside the ghetto. They hadn't realized how large it was. It would take more planning, more rigging. Choreography, their teacher used to say, was a map not of where your body could fly, but of where your mind wanted to go. The idea was to remember each moment they were in the ghetto, that they were in the ghetto, even while in souvenir shops filled with legless dolls that did nothing but split apart and swallow one another. The idea was to pilfer any spoons they could as they ate in bright cafes. Spoons since they wouldn't poke. Spoons since they'd clatter up a raging racket. Nights they spent cocooning thread around the handles, tunneling needles into the foil-like trim of their costumes. Skirts of tulle began to resemble fencing. The idea was the belief beneath the skin of rescue, that the most probable thing in the world for some girl like them, who'd walk the streets of the ghetto, who was cold, tired, sick, hungry, orphaned, starved, alone, crowded, waiting for death, would be to imagine a sparkling bird of shiny rags and clinging spoons tumbling out of the sky, arms extended for the liftoff. The idea was the hunger for flight. The idea was that people all over the city would see their twirling rescues, and with each liftoff and with each landing, imagine the possibilities and the failures and the failures. The idea, before one of them was arrested for climbing a fence to stake a rope, was to take flight that night. The idea when she returned was to reset the flight. She returned with a streaky scar on her shoulder, a pink rivulet shining as a trinket, the raw skin aligned through their plans, the rigging too small, the ghetto too big, the hours of the night when they might not be caught too short and too full of eyes. They sat without talking at a cafe on Juju Street. Their food had come, but they had no silverware. She took a spoon from her bag, a fugitive from their overnight crafting, and ate without lifting her head. The idea was hunger.